The NFL season is finally here. We have week one. Today I'm going to be giving my predictions for every game in week one, both against the spread and straight up. Let's dive right into the Thursday night football action. We have the Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Detroit Lions. It's a 6.5 point spread at the moment for the Kansas City Chiefs. I think the Chiefs take it, and they also cover the spread. I have them winning 28-20. Obviously, the big storyline, Chris Jones likely not going to play. Travis Kelce gets injured in practice, hyperextends his knee. How are the Chiefs going to look without two of their three best players? I still think that Mahomes is going to be able to be really magical in the first game of the season. The Lions, I think, will be a good team, but this matchup is just very tough. You know, you're taking on the reigning Super Bowl champions. I do think that this will be a very fun first game of the season, but I do have the Chiefs taking this one 28-20. Next, we have the Cleveland Browns taking on the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals are in an interesting spot. Joe Burrow coming off of an injury in the practice session of training camp. I do think he will certainly play in this game, but he may not be 100%. They've struggled against Cleveland historically over the past few seasons as well. I do also think that the Bengals tend to start relatively slow in their season and really kind of ramp it up as the season goes on. The Browns have a ton of talent. They're a very talented roster. The offensive line's fantastic. Nick Chubb is, one of the best running backs in the NFL. That defensive front is really, really good. You obviously have Myles Garrett, but also add Zadarius Smith and some great corners as well. We'll see if Denzel Ward plays. I think that'll be big for this game, but ultimately I do think the Browns win this one at 27-24. The Bengals are favored in this game, but ultimately, it's a home game for Cleveland. I do think that they are a very, very talented team, and there's a lot of things that the Bengals just typically sort out towards, week 4 of the season. Might not go their way in week 1, and I have the Browns winning this week 27-24. Next, we have the 49ers taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers. The 49ers 3.5 point favorites in this game. I think this should be an interesting one. Brock Purdy, starting after getting injured in the playoffs last year. We'll see if he's able to continue his magic from last season. Kenny Pickett and the Steelers offense looked really good in the preseason. Will they be able to continue that moving forward this year? I think the 49ers do take this one 26-20. I think they do cover the spread. I do think this will be a very fun matchup, but ultimately I am going to go with the 49ers in this one. I just think that they have a couple more pieces that really kind of put them over that top, especially on defense. They are just such a good unit there. Next, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Minnesota Vikings. I do think that this is a big spread. It's 6.5 points. I do think the Buccaneers will be one of the worst teams in the league this year, but even still, from a week 1 opening game line, I do think that is a bit wide. I'm going to go with the Vikings winning this one 24-20. The Bucs still have some nice pieces, especially on defense, but I do think ultimately this Vikings offense is going to take over the game when it matters. Justin Jefferson, you've obviously added Jordan Addison as well. Kirk Cousins at the helm still. This defense is in a rough spot for the Vikings, I think, especially on that back end, but I do think this will be a closer game. I think the Buccaneers cover that 6.5 point spread, but ultimately the Vikings do win this game and get the win in week 1. Next, we have the Texans taking on the Ravens. This is one of the most lopsided week 1 matchups, and the Ravens are 9.5 point favorites, and I do think they cover and win this game. 9.5 is a big spread, but I do think they'll win this one 28-17. This offense for the Ravens should be very interesting to kind of see with a new offensive coordinator in there. Can he get the most out of Lamar Jackson? Don't think it'll necessarily be the toughest test against the Texans, who have some nice pieces. They've got, some really good building blocks for the future, but I still think as a whole, they're still pretty far away from being a true competitive team in the AFC. So I do like the Ravens to win this one and cover in week 1. Next, the Falcons versus the Panthers. I'm going to go with the Falcons winning this one 20-17. For the Panthers, it's Bryce Young's first start. He doesn't have the best wide receivers. That can definitely be a tough situation for a rookie quarterback week 1. This Falcons defense isn't anything crazy special, but I do think they will be able to run the ball very effectively, and I do think that may limit the opportunities for Bryce Young in his first game. I expect Bijan Robinson to have a very nice game. This Panthers defense is pretty solid, but overall I do think that the Falcons are going to just run the football really well, control the clock, and Bryce Young's not going to have a ton of chances to really show off in his first NFL action. Do you think the Falcons win this divisional matchup 20-17 in a close one and cover that spread? Next, we have the Washington Commanders versus the Arizona Cardinals. This should be an interesting game. Sam Howell getting his first start of this season. Played in basically just one game last year. He'll be the starting quarterback for the Commanders. And then for the Cardinals, it's going to be one of Clayton Tune or Josh Dobbs. I don't think it really matters regardless. This Cardinals team is in a really rough spot, especially at the beginning of this season. There's some nice pieces across this roster. You look at Paris Johnson. I'm excited to see what he can do. I think Marquise Brown's a decent player, Zach Ertz as well. But that defense is atrocious. And then the offense really is not inspiring at all with one of those two guys at quarterback. I do think they're going to really struggle to put up points. I have the Commanders winning this one 26-17, covering that 5.5 point spread. If nothing else, the Commanders have a very good defense. That defensive front is ferocious, and I do think that they'll win this game with relative ease. We have the Jacksonville Jaguars taking on the Indianapolis Colts. This is a 4.5 point spread. Definitely think the Jaguars are the more talented team. You've got Trevor Lawrence. Calvin Ridley should be a really interesting piece for them to add. I do think he will have a big week game one as well. This Colts team has some really nice talent, but there's going to be a lot of a figuring out period, in my opinion, for Anthony Richardson to really become a top level passer. I think he has the athletic traits, but there was still a lot that he needed to work on as a true passer. I do think Steichen can get some pretty good use out of his legs, but there's just kind of a limit to this offense right now. No Jonathan Taylor. There's just some big question marks all across this roster. For the Jaguars, they were a very good team last year. I expect them to be a really solid team this year as well. Trevor Lawrence, Doug Peterson, I think, that's a very good combination, and they're going to roll in week one. I'm going to have them winning this one 31-23. Next, we have the Tennessee Titans taking on the New Orleans Saints. I think this should be a very close matchup. The Saints are 3.5 point favorites at home. I do think the Titans are a bit underrated. How people are talking about them going into the season. Their offensive line is a complete mess. The quarterback play is uninspiring. It's very mediocre with Ryan Tannehill, but they still have Derrick Henry. I do think he's going to be incredibly productive, and I really like a lot of pieces across this defense. For the Saints, I'm a little bit lower on them than a lot of other people. I think Derek Carr has to prove that he wasn't the problem in Vegas, which I do think he was a part of that problem at the very least. They've got some pieces here and there, but there's still a lot of question marks, most notably the play calling and the coaching. In my opinion, Dennis Allen, I just do not think has proven to be a good head coach at all. I think that the Titans come into this one fired up with Mike Vrabel at the helm. They're able to run with Derrick Henry and have a really effective game and win this one in a close one, 24-20. Next, we have another divisional matchup, the Broncos versus the Raiders. I think this will be a very close one. The Raiders obviously go and get Jimmy G. The Broncos, their big addition was at the coaching spot. You get Sean Payton. Can he fix Russell Wilson? I think this will be a very close game. I have the Broncos winning 24-21, so that's actually Vegas covering that 3.5 point spread, but the Broncos winning straight up. I think the Vegas defense is still kind of a complete mess. The offense has some pieces, obviously Davante Adams, the biggest one of them all. Jimmy G, I think, will really benefit from having Davante Adams there, and I do think they will have a very solid passing attack. The Broncos, I do think, will be much better coached, much more disciplined. The questions just still remain about Russell Wilson, but I do think they are able to get the win in a close one here, 24-21 against their division rival. Next, we have the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the New England Patriots. The Patriots with the new offensive coordinator that actually knows how to call an offense, unlike Matt Patricia. The Eagles losing both of their coordinators. How will they be able to respond? I still think they ultimately win this game 26-20. I think they're the much more talented team. I do think it will be interesting to see how Belichick counters this really explosive Eagles offense. Obviously, the Eagles are incredibly talented all across the roster. I don't think the Patriots will be able to score a ton of points, which is ultimately why I have the Eagles winning this game 26-20 in week one. Next, we have the Rams and the Seahawks, another divisional matchup in the NFC West. I think this will be a very interesting game. Matt Stafford back healthy, hopefully, after he was banged up a lot last year. Cooper Kupp, unfortunately, is not. I think this will be, a real test of what Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford are able to do with a roster that is not nearly as talented as it has been for the Rams in past years. The Seahawks, I think, on the other hand, are really poised for a big season. The three-headed monster at wide receiver. They've got two really interesting running backs as well. The offensive line's developing. The secondary is really coming into place with Devin Witherspoon added to that mix. I think the Seahawks roll in this one. They get them 30-23 and have a really good offensive performance, and I am very excited to see what Geno Smith can do this year as well. Next, in one of the more exciting week one matchups, we have the Dolphins versus the Chargers. I think the Chargers really need to prove a lot this year. Justin Herbert, you bring in Kellen Moore to really hopefully unlock some of his abilities. I think, Herbert's got to have a big year with some big weapons. You bring in Quentin Johnston as well. He's really kind of got to make the most of this year, and it's mostly on Brandon Staley. The pressure's on him, not Herbert. I think Herbert's a great player. but Staley's really got to take advantage this year. Starting out with a tough matchup, the Dolphins were a really interesting team last year. When Tua was healthy, his offense was one of the best, if not, the most efficient offense in the NFL. Just so well called by Mike McDaniel, and I do think that they will have a very good game plan. I predict them to win this game in a bit of a high-scoring one, 31-27. I think this one will be one of the games to watch in Week 1. The Bears and the Packers next. Finally, the Bears do not have to deal with Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay. We'll have to see how Jordan Love looks. I think Love will have an interesting transition. He doesn't necessarily have amazing weapons, much like Aaron Rodgers faced towards the end of his career. Justin Fields is a very polarizing player. Is he going to turn into, the type of potential that we've all seen on his amazing highlight touchdown runs, or is he going to, fail to ever become a consistent passer? I think, this is going to be a huge season for Justin Fields. This game is a huge start as well. You've got, the Packers coming to town in a game that isn't a must-win, but for a lot of Bears fans, you got to get the monkey of beating the Packers off your back, and this would be a huge start to potentially a very big year for Justin Fields and the Bears if they're able to get a win. I do think that they do win this one 24-21. They do cover that 1.5 point spread and win in a close one against their division foes. On Sunday Night Football, we have the Cowboys taking on the Giants. I'm going to go with the Cowboys 28-24 in this one. Really excited to see this offense with Brandon Cooks in there. The offensive line is healthy and looking really good as well. Tyron Smith back in there. You have Tyler Smith right next to him. That's a great 1-2 combo. Dak Prescott needs to cut down on the turnovers from last year, but I think he's poised and ready to do so. CeeDee Lamb, I think, can really break out and become an elite level receiver. And then that defense is so well coached, and you have potential Defensive Player of the Year candidate Micah Parsons there as well. This Giants team, I think, way overperformed expectations last year. They're incredibly well coached by Brian Daboll, but I do think they do still have some limited upside when it comes to the explosiveness of their offense. That's why they drafted Jalen Hyatt, but ultimately don't know if he's going to have a huge game, especially against these great corners in Stephon Gilmore and Trayvon Diggs. I think this is a very, very interesting matchup to watch. I'm going to go with the Cowboys 28-24 and covering that 2.5 point spread. And then the most anticipated game of the week on Monday Night Football, we have the Buffalo Bills taking on the new look New York Jets with Aaron Rodgers at the helm. I am buying into a lot of the Aaron Rodgers resurgence hype. I just think that he's in a great situation. Garrett Wilson's a fantastic player, and I do think that this Jets team is going to be a real force to be reckoned with in the AFC. For the Bills, I think this is a very important game to kind of get right. They really did not look good in the divisional round versus the Bengals last year, so starting off with a big win against a very talented opponent in their division would be a huge game for them. I'm going to go with the Jets in this one, though, 28-26. I have them, covering that 1.5 point spread as they are underdogs. I think this will be a fantastic matchup to watch and really excited to see this one on Monday Night Football in Week 1. Those are my game picks for Week 1 of the 2023 NFL season. What do you think is going to happen down below? Who is going to win each game? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like content just like this, please hit that subscribe button as well. So close to 1,000 subscribers and would truly appreciate your support. Hit the like button while you're down there as well. It truly means a lot. Thank you so much for watching. I will catch you in the next one.